Hello and welcome to the very chill, very relaxed Raptors Weekly podcast. The first of probably almost undeniably many this season. Seems like something we'll be doing, have been doing. And I'm here with Louis Zatzman, who is my dear, dear friend, a very good pal of mine. We talk about the Raptors on the podcast and off of it. We talk about many things. But today, the Raptors themselves, a team in flux, as it were, much like myself and Louis. And now we're going to talk about them. Louis, do you have any, what is your cliff notes of the Toronto Raptors this season, by the way?
So far, man. Also, first of all, thanks for having me. Great to talk to you. I mean, we've been talking. We always spend more time talking before the podcast than we do on it. So great to see you, officially. So the vibes, they are good, which we should add. It's been over a year since the vibes, they were good. Last year, the vibes were horrible, and then they just got worse and worse and worse, and it was just miserable. And I mean, maybe they're going to be worse at basketball this year, but let's just take a moment to appreciate the first time we've had good vibes in forever.
It's kind of funny. It's been a bit of a meme on Twitter, I suppose, because the Raptors social media team won't put out any video of Scottie Barnes actually playing basketball. It's just him screaming into a camera or, doing
Dancing.
a shoot, hitting the quan, all these different things, or Precious Achiuwa coming up and dancing with them. And it's this is funny because the Raptors clearly are trying to rely on, a cult of personality. The social media team has obviously noticed what has gone on with OG Anunoby, and they want to build around that type of cult of personality, at least to, because that's the job of the social media team, is to create new avenues for people to enjoy the team. We talked about fandom many times before. So it seems something akin to that, a team of content creators. Delano Banton teaching everybody, to teach in the classic Toronto man's voice. Scottie Barnes is clapping, yelling profanities after three-pointers, is blocking everybody in the league. And David Johnson looks like 21 Savage. So there's, lots of potential for stuff like that. But we have the returning players, the consistent cast, and I think that's comprised of basically Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr. to a lesser degree, Chris Boucher, Khem Birch, everybody's boy, Malachi Flynn, and Yuta Watanabe. So here's the thing. The preseason is always kind of, it's an amalgam of different things happening because, A, you want to see how much farther along the young guys are. If Scottie Barnes has just got it started with an NBA regimen, what's he doing with that? What's his body look like? What's his progression look like with the tweak in his jump shot, where apparently he's starting to shoot off of a different finger? Really big adjustment, by the way, just like a heads up, people. And you have guys like Delano Banton who are trying to put on weight. He said he's talking to Chris Boucher about that. And you have guys like Yuta Watanabe last year who in preseason actually gained a significant amount of ground on Oshae Brissett, eventually surpassing him. And then he got on with the team. He's on a partial. He's partially guaranteed currently. So we'll see what happens next. But finally, it's to see the stars. Your star-studded cast of guys coming back and seeing them on the court again. Pascal Siakam will not be involved with that. But Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, I think we start there. What are your expectations for them this year?
Okay. Very high, to be honest. I think Fred VanVleet needs to be all-star caliber, probably will be all-star caliber, to be honest. By caliber, I mean, his numbers will be more or less the same as the guys that make the game. Whether he makes it will probably depend on the team's success rather than his own game. I think, his shooting is obviously, unimpeachable at this point. And actually some non-public databases had him as an even better pull-up shooter than the public numbers. I mean, one of the best 15 or so pull-up shooters in the league, which he was not that good until last year. He's talked about adding an in-between game, a floater, which is something I've, for about two and a half years, I've wanted him to do. I mean, defensively, he's obviously top 10 in the league. So I just think if he isn't an all-star adjacent player, it would be a step back. What I'm expecting is for him to be honestly a little better than that, because he's going to have more touches. I mean, I have insane expectations for VanVleet. Am I going crazy? We talked about you shouting down guests. Are you going to gulag me for this one? Like, this is your opportunity.
Yeah, I think, well, you and I are probably still a decent ways away on Fred.
That's right.
Because I have my reservations about a Fred-led offense. And I also do recognize that he is, if you go by catch-alls, like catch-all metrics, Fred is going to be an all-star. And by the way, all-star caliber is like a top 35 player, because there's a rotating cast of all-stars every year that fall in and out of it. Like Pascal Siakam is unequivocally an all-star level player. Was he an all-star last year? No. But that doesn't mean he's not all-star anymore. And Fred VanVleet is a guy who figures to perhaps fall in and out of that over the next, few years of his career. He's certainly good enough, and by the numbers has that Kyle Lowry-esque ability to just drive winning on the floor. Of course, it was tougher to do last year, but the plus minus and stuff like that, it was tough to lose minutes when Fred VanVleet was on the floor, especially because he just that pull-up ability can really save the offense sometimes. And in addition to that, he's just a wonderfully remarkable point of attack defender. Is at the nail, dig downs, just immensely useful. And so that's super exciting to see. But I do have significant reservations about what the offense looks like when he has generating the most looks for his teammates, because he typically drives offense to the sides of the floor rather than right at the rim. And whether it's for himself or for teammates, a guy like Fred, who is the polar opposite of a guy like Kyrie. Kyrie passed out of maybe 28% of his drives last year. He was going to the bucket all the time, and maybe need to pass more, maybe needs to pass less, but he gets to the bucket. Fred, one of the highest volume passers out of drives last year, and it's because he does not put pressure on the rim. He doesn't force the defense to shift, and he doesn't break them out of their shell very often, but he can create middle of the road looks for the team basically at any point in time. His craft for shot creation tops out at a very medium range, but he's also so damn useful in other parts of the floor that he's just a very good player anyway. But with Pascal out and Scottie Barnes, who, has significant passing flair coming out of Florida State, OG Anunoby, who we're going to see if he can ratchet it up as approximating the usage of a second option, maybe. That's going to leave a lot for Fred. And we saw a lot of Fred last year. And I think Fred is at his best as a secondary or third guy. And, putting that many possessions into his hands, I think is going to be pretty dicey. There's going to be just as many droughts last year, if not more.
So we saw it against the Boston Celtics in the playoffs where, like you said, Fred, and not only does he like to pass on his drives, he likes to pass out, not in, and he likes to pass in particular to the corners, which is what you're mentioning, pushing to the side. And the Celtics switched ahead of the ball where they were taking away the pass to the corners on any Fred pick and roll, just leaving a guy on an island saying, all right, do something then, Fred. Your pass is gone. The roller is taken away. What are you going to do? And he didn't do much. I mean, every once in a while, he hit a pull up from the mid range. He got tracked from behind a lot by Daniel Tice. It was not wonderful to see. And I think he's built a lot of his progression since then on addressing those weaknesses. And obviously, they are still weaknesses. I agree with you. But pulling up from way behind the 3-point line specifically to address that, adding in pull-ups from the free throw line specifically to address that. If he learns to pass, for dunks and layups, somehow creates those angles, it's hard without, like you say, breaking the shell. But if he adds that, then I have fewer qualms. But like you say, high floor or medium floor, not as high a ceiling as a guy like Lowry for creating for others, which is where Siakam comes in. You mentioned Siakam is the other star we were looking at. I mean, I think he has been very good as like a no energy player for 2 seasons now. Like even in 1920, when he was third team all NBA, I mean,
Second team.
second. Oh my God. Second team. Yeah, of course. Second team all NBA.
Top 10 player, Pascal Siakam.
Top 10 player. He was, attacking set defenses. He was getting it in the post with no movement. He was isolating. It was just ugly. It was ugly sets. He was getting ugly looks. And I mean, if he can just run in transition, we've been saying this for 2 years now, but I mean, I'm hoping that the Raptors playing without him for a time, getting the base offense in there, getting guys looks, showing not only to them, but to him as well. Like, look, we can get shots up. We can run an offense without you doing everything. Maybe he can start to get some of those easy shots again, because I mean, he was second team all NBA with like no easy shots ever. I mean, if he just created easy shots, like God, he could be a top 10 NBA player.
Yeah, that's the thing with Pascal that intrigues me a lot, is that there's been, and we've talked about this, and that's the thing. You're going to repeat stuff when you talk about, a team for as long as we do, and the players are the same. Like Gary Trent Jr., maybe he will materially change the conversation around himself this year. But Pascal Siakam, as far as what's being asked of him by this roster, it's been fundamentally the same for a very long stretch of games now. And what has been asked is one of the highest rates of isolation in the NBA. He isolates more than a guy like Kevin Durant last year. Yeah. That seems absurd given their tool set, given what they're able to do on the court. And that also speaks to, how much Brooklyn has going on and how often they're getting second side action against a moving defense that they don't have to isolate that much. And that speaks to the limitations of the Raptors offense as well, is that they have to just hand the ball to Siakam and say, please generate a rotation from the defense so we can have a guy like Norm have a 45 cut to the rim or something like that, or you generate an X out and then we get a corner three, something like that, right? And basically anybody else on the roster is not generating that stuff at a high level, so they asked Pascal to do it, and we've seen a guy who is facing set defenses trying to toggle between so many different decisions, not even just for himself as a scorer, but as an overall creator for the team. And that's where the highs and lows have come in. Undoubtedly some very high highs. Like he can sleepwalk to 25, 8, and 9. Genuinely, yep. He generates a lot from the defense. They send a lot at him. If he's making the right reads, if he's kind of getting downhill, there's lots of stuff that can happen with him on the floor. But it'll be really interesting to see what he can command of the defense differently than he has in the past. With his, obviously, I would say top tier playmaking, given his front court position. You can get into some of the passing metrics that go into tracking data. You don't have to. And if you want to, they're there, but they recognize him as one of the very best passers in the NBA as far as shot quality for teammates. Now, that's tracking data. It has its caveats, of course, but it's out there just as another tool to look at what he's doing. And whether that's coming downhill or out of the post, he's creating a lot of great shots for his teammates. And you wonder if he gets that 3-point shot working. He has like a 580, I think, attempt sample size at like 36%. And then last year it was about 250 at 30%. I think I probably take the 580 sample and expect him to kind of get closer to that. Even when he was hitting like 40% off the start of the 2019-20 year, Nick Nurse had said they were putting him on like an 18-month program, and he was hitting really early, and that, things were subject to change because it was still it's a shot that is being overhauled. So that's probably still going on to some degree, even with a torn labrum. But more than anything, you just want him to come back healthy, even out his body so that he's not putting pressure on other parts of his body. He's not compensating, all that kind of stuff, and just be the athletic, very strange, of great utility player that he is. And if he's that guy, he'll be undoubtedly the best player on the Raptors, and they can punch up at a playoff spot.
Yeah, So this may be very specific, but that's what I do. I get specific. When he gave that interview to the New York Times and said he didn't know if he was the man, that was weird. And so on media day, there were a lot of questions about that to Bobby, to Nick, to Pascal, to Fred. And Fred gave a really thoughtful, long answer. You may have heard it was more or less about how, you wouldn't know unless you played high level basketball, but, chemistry is hard between two stars and you don't know who is the star and who isn't and who runs the show. And I thought it was revealing in that between the lines, there probably was a little bit of a split between Pascal and Kyle last year. And you could see that in that they never ran pick and roll with each other, even though 4-1, 1-4, either way, it was probably Toronto's best pick and roll look. And yet Kyle always ran with the centers, even Baines. He just always ran pick and roll with Baines. And Fred was the guy who ran pick and rolls with Pascal, and it worked fairly well. And they're both high thinking guys. They're both quick reaction guys, Pascal and Kyle, yet they didn't seem to have much of a two-man game. I don't really understand it, and I don't want to speculate too much. I've already speculated a lot, but I think if Pascal just plays with Fred without getting in his head, makes quick reads, actually becomes a roll man, which he's never really decided to do, or even if he just runs a lot of pick and roll with Fred setting, brush screens, slip screens, whatever, then that could be amazing. And that could be something we haven't seen because of whatever weirdness there was that they've all seemed to hint at.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from, and this is somewhat speculation, but a complicated relationship with Nick Nurse, obviously. Nick Nurse, and this is objective. Nick Nurse in media talked about Pascal in a way that you would not find a lot of coaches would talk about a max player. That's objective. And that's where you can pull from where Fred is saying, I'm going to shoot this ball 40 times. Nobody better blink, better not see anything on the sidelines. There was obviously...
Because Nick blinked.
Yes, Nick blinked. And this is what I was talking about earlier, there's very little structural help with Pascal in what they're asking him to do. Like when you look at Norman Powell last year, when he's playing fantastic basketball, you look at a team on the Raptors that is very conducive to his strengths, and he gets to play off them all the time. And wow, he looks great. And now he makes more money than Fred VanVleet, who actually, you know what? I don't care about counting pockets, but Norman Powell got paid, and Fred VanVleet got paid like probably less than you and I would think he'd be worth. Same with OG Anunoby.
Yep.
And so, and at least, Pascal Siakam's on the max, but they're just tossing him the ball. And like you said, no 1-4 pick and roll. Everybody loved the horn sets last year, and probably it started getting sniffed out towards the end of the season. But 3-man actions like Chicago, Miami, not the teams, but the actions, there's lots of stuff you can do to get him the ball in motion. And basically none of that is ever explored for Pascal Siakam. And this is where it's interesting, is that because of the coaching staff, or is that because Pascal wants the ball at the 45 extended, demands it there, and everybody kind of, bows to that? It's tough to tell. And unless you're aggressively in Pascal's camp and he's divulging that stuff to you, you couldn't really tell. But, who's to say really? I think probably they need to be more creative with how they get him the ball. Like you said, with 1-4 pick and rolls, getting him the ball in motion so he can make good decisions, giving him the ball on the fast break, because Fred VanVleet has been a historically very poor decision maker in transition. Let Fred run to the wing. He's an incredible 3-point shooter. He's been like one of the most high volume and consistent 3-point shooters off the catch in the NBA for 3 years now. And also, as we said, a burgeoning pull-up game. So just little things like that, kind of, dealing towards their strength instead of, kind of really highlighting their weaknesses at times. Is when things get tough, it's easier to identify what's happening on the court and where they're missing, obviously. And with Kyle Lowry not there, we might see a lot of that this year. Or we might see things go a little bit smoother, and those guys, it's just fully, we're playing to Fred and Pascal's strengths now. And then the wild card really is OG. But I'm glad you brought up the Pascal stuff, because I do think that's interesting, that there's an organization that is clearly built ideologically in the mold of Kyle Lowry. It's very hard-nosed. It's very that way. And when Pascal says, I'm the star, I want to be treated like it, and he's getting the blink on the sideline, or he's getting anything, he's pissed. He's like, you gave me the max, let me earn it, that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
And the team was not structured for him. Maybe it will be now. There's two types of games. There's a normal game, and then there's the Sunday matinee game where, the team flew into whatever town, let's say Orlando, on like Thursday. They've had a couple days off. Clearly, they're all hungover on Sunday afternoon. If you get in early, if you have an afternoon game, it's just, this is reality, right? You pass. The Raptors in the championship year lost a game in Orlando on a Sunday matinee game where it was like the worst game they'd ever played. And everyone was upset. And it was just so obvious they were hungover. And those games are fine. Like that, every team has games like that. But when you play that way, when it matters, when you play that way, when you're clearly not hungover, you're just not passing, the offense is mud. That's weird, right? When it's not because it's a Sunday matinee. And the Raptors did that a lot last year. The offense looked like that. And sometimes they won those games because they're really talented, and their defense, even despite the numbers, their defense could ratchet up when it mattered. But, I think a lot of our discussion about Fred and Pascal, what do they look like? The team can't look like that. If the structure falls back on that more often than from time to time, then they're not going to have good seasons.
Well, and the thing is, too, this is something you and I recognize, and we're not coaching, we're not out there, of course, but their games are kind of like hand in glove. Honestly, their strengths really fit together, and neither of them is a defensive liability. In fact, they're both like all defense level on that end. That they make, stylistically, should be a gruesome twosome, and have been when they've been playing next to, in the infrastructure of the 1920 Raptors and in the infrastructure of the championship team, a gruesome twosome indeed. And so you hope there's a return to that. And obviously, by the tone of this conversation, a listener can tell that you are more invested in Fred's success than maybe the average person, and I more invested in Pascal's success than maybe the average person. So, it would be in our best interest for those two guys to figure it out. And they both appear to be extremely conscientious and thoughtful and kind people, and they're both incredibly talented at basketball and, by all counts, hard workers. So I expect things to shake out in a meaningful way. Does that mean the Raptors are a good team? Probably not. They still have significant holes on the roster. But if you have those two guys operating at near an all-star level, you can you don't have to worry about that much. You at least you have an idea of what you're working with there.
Agreed. They could be good, right? They could be good. If Fred plays 70 plus games, Pascal comes back, looks like himself, is healthy the rest of the year, there are pathways, right?
Yeah.
If there's more injuries, if Pascal doesn't look like himself when he comes back, it gets much shakier, right? But given health, there are ways they could be a slightly above 500 team.
Yeah, I'm probably lower on the Raptors than you are, and it is I like Khem Birch. I think he has no business starting on a team that is good in the NBA. And you'd be very hard pressed to find numbers that would ever suggest anything near that, and the eye test doesn't either. There are Khem Birch optimists out there, and I appreciate optimism. I don't get it. And that doesn't mean he's bad. I'm just saying, if they want to be 500, Khem Birch is not really a starter on a 500 team.
Are we talking Khem Birch now? Let's talk Khem Birch.
Let's talk Khem Birch. Front court stuff. Okay, so Khem Birch, if you can give me the rundown on like him as, I don't know, because if if I had to rank centers, he could probably get close to falling out of the top 30 for me. But, we don't have to rank him that way, but obviously you're a little bit higher on him than I am. And so I'd like to hear the case.
Okay. The case is on the defensive end entirely. Defensively, he is a freak athlete. I mean, he can be in two places at once. He's actually the most athletic center Toronto has had since like Lucas Nogueira. No, I don't know. He is an exceptional athlete on the defensive end. He does the thing that Marc Gasol did where he could have his weight in two places at once, and the offensive player thought he was closing out, and the roller thought he was being tagged by Birch, and the play is blown up just by virtue of him doing that. But he does that at twice the speed that Gasol did it at. I mean, he recovers well. He moves well in space for, a few seconds. Like he can do a late clock scenario in space against a guard. You don't want to switch him with like 20 seconds on the clock, but he can close a hole. And also, I mean, statistically, he's not a great rebounder, but his team always rebounds exceptionally well. In fact, I'm not looking at cleaning the less now, but I think it's always been like 80th percentile or above. Opponents' offensive rebounding rates go down, like the on-off rate versus him on the bench versus him off, him on the court versus him off. So he blocks out. He's okay in the post. Like he's not wonderful against a good big scorer, but that doesn't really matter other than 5-10 times a year. So yeah, the last thing, he creates havoc. He does create deflections. Turnover rates go up when he's in the game, which if Toronto is actually going to score like at any way in a good rate, it'll be because they force turnovers, get out in transition. So yeah, defensively, I mean, he's the thing, man. Like he does the defense. And if Toronto is going to be a good team, it won't be because Birch is a good roller. It won't be because Birch learns to shoot. Those are very unlikely paths to success. But it's an extremely likely path to success that they have a top 3 or 4 defense when Birch is on the floor, and they can just cobble together the rest.
Yeah, I guess you're probably hoping on some organizational chemistry there. He doesn't defend the rim well, man. Like that's never been a big part of his game. So that's interesting. I do understand like he's more mobile than a lot of centers the Raptors have employed, especially in his ability to, as you say, shift weight and get from place to place, especially going side to side. I do see that, but man, the Raptors have had a lot of guys rotating over, and none of them were Marc Gasol or even Serge Ibaka last year. And it was, although Aaron Baines' defensive numbers were much better than his offensive numbers last year, but it's really important to defend the rim. You look at a lot of teams that are good now in the league, and they have a guy who is a threat to alter shots flat-footed. Khem Birch is not, and he's also not very good when he's in air. That's something, a lot of guys kind of jerry-rig into becoming good defenders just through, they operate with guile and that kind of stuff. And Birch certainly seems like a guy who could be that. So I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying, historically, he has not defended the rim well at all. And I'm really interested to see how he functions as the biggest guy on the court for the Raptors at times. If they're successful, because obviously the vision is with Scottie Barnes, OG, and Pascal. If things break right, they can, let that work for however long, and maybe they have a new looking team as far as how they play the front court position. But for this year, as you say, Khem Birch will have to be a big part of it. So the fact that he doesn't protect the rim well does give me some pause. That's my hang up with him. Although I do recognize like those stepping out in late clock situations, also being able to move if the Raptors are still playing that very aggressive brand of defense, a guy who's probably, as far as court coverage goes, a much better defender than a lot of his contemporaries at the center position. That's all well and good, but you still have to put a cap on the rim sometimes. And I haven't seen anything like that yet in his career. So that's my hang up.
But that was never really Toronto's issue last year. Was it not that they just gave up like 1,000,000 open corner threes?
Well, they give up corner threes, yes, but they also like there's less contests at the rim. You give up corner threes and they sell out. And yes, they have to sell out because they know that there's rotations to be made behind them. Like if Kyle Lowry is the low man in some possessions, that's good. But there are a lot of cases last year where the low man was just a pylon because of the size that they were left with down there, or Aaron Baines, who was a step late a lot of the time. And there was just straight up like pick and roll possessions where particularly good, like a ball handler like De'Aaron Fox, he gets downhill and it's a bucket. Even guys like Devontae Graham were scoring on the Raptors at the rim in the pick and roll. And Devontae Graham is a really bad finisher. I know you and I both like Devontae a lot, but he should not be getting layups on your team. Maybe it'll bear out better in your philosophy and how you think it'll apply. But I am worried about that because, especially with Siakam gone for the first part of the year, the core coverage will be lacking, and there will definitely be more onus on protecting the rim, I think.
So this is actually a really interesting point, one that I'm extremely curious about now, because Toronto's defensive philosophy seems to be like group, it's like preventative rim protection. You know, if you get to the rim, you see a wall, and then you rotate with the ball basically, or ahead of the passes, and then whatever shot they get at the end of the shot clock is what they get. And a lot of that could have been because VanVleet and Siakam are so unbelievable at those rotations where they can like stymie up the rim before a guy even gets there, or it could have been because Gasol also is a wonderful flat-footed rim protector, like you said. And I'm curious now. I actually don't have an answer. I'd have to really go look at some numbers. Will VanVleet and OG and, Siakam, when he's healthy, will their presence deter enough shots at the rim just by virtue of that philosophy? Because they help in the paint early, and they help, like they show, they don't fake and go back to their man. Like they get there. Is that enough? I'm curious now because it's hard to say what variable actually was good when they were good at defending the rim.
Yeah, I think Marc Gasol was a bigger part of it than most people think.
Yeah.
It was especially, and I think maybe we overrated the 87 defensive rating unit of Siakam and OG, that front court against the Celtics, which was, absurd and awesome and was so much fun, but that's not really tenable over a regular season. So, and they didn't go for that. And that's why I said before I went on my little soliloquy is that you have more faith in the guys to have that chemistry, to have that cohesion, because as the 15th ranked defense last year, and also a team that's numbers were bolstered significantly by, garbage time and, getting into games, they're down like 19, they get it to 8, but then they lose by 12. They're gaining those plus minus numbers and that kind of stuff. And they're improving on defensive rating because they have a really nice stretch here and there. But for the most part, the cohesion defensively was not there last year. And even with Pascal and OG and Fred and Kyle, who still has a reputation as a very good positional team defender, reputation, of course, but, they were not a successful defensive team. And Khem Birch's defensive numbers do not have any better indicators than Aaron Baines. Like they are more or less the same. And so that's the really interesting part is that I think everybody just thinks not Baines equals good right now. And I understand after that last year, like, and this is not you, but I've seen that sentiment a lot, is not Baines equals good. But the center position, if you watch the NBA playoffs and you watched last year, it is still so damn important. And the Raptors do not have a top tier center or anything close to that. And, of course, Khem Birch can improve. And as you say, maybe the cohesion defensively will be top tier. But I will have to see that first because, as you and I know, like Gary Trent Jr. didn't have a very good year defensively last year. And Siakam is going to be out. And it seems like it might be hairy off the start. But we'll see. I
Maybe Scottie will
point,
help.
though. That's the thing, too. But also, like, defending in space in a team concept The floor is bigger. He might be the low man more often. Those guys usually take a little bit longer. I'm sure Scottie's going to end up as an all-world guy defensively, but I mean, we'll see.
The other element of the front court, because I mean, as high as I am on Birch, I really only think he caps out at like 26 minutes a game, like max. And so Precious, right? Precious needs to be a real minute guy, like a every game rotation player. And defensively, I mean, he could maybe be the guy you're talking about. He hasn't been ever in the NBA. He hasn't even shown he has sometimes shown glimmers of it. But I mean, he's a guy who can annihilate the rim athletically, just hasn't put it together scheme wise, gotten there early. He hasn't sniffed out plays. But guys develop quickly when they're young. And if Precious takes those steps, I mean, that could hugely plug up some holes.
Yeah, it would be really, really fun if Precious was like a plus defender this year. That'd be super meaningful for the Raptors. And if he generated any type of pick and roll chemistry, particularly the roll part, pick and roll chemistry with any of Malachi or Fred, OG, Svi, maybe even, right? Who's on a guaranteed contract now and is maybe a better shooter than people give him credit for, maybe. But yeah, Precious should be really interesting. He doesn't have as much tape as you might expect because like Miami is like they spent time playing Myers Leonard. He never really played like Miami. Bam. Yeah. So but that's the thing, right? Is I'm coming at this from like a pessimistic point of view because I'm saying a lot of things that have not happened have to happen.
Yeah.
But of course, that doesn't mean like I'm not going to be hubristic and say, I'm saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying like it seems like there's a few outcomes that have to stack, and those outcomes don't seem super likely to me. But I mean,
what's it called?
Toronto has teased outcomes like that out of people before and stacked them before. So
what's it called in parlay? They need to parlay. You said put his pick and roll game together. I'm less confident about that. When I was covering the 905, every game, that was Chris Boucher's. One of the seasons I was doing that was Chris Boucher's MVP season. And man, even in the 905, he was rolling like, Jordan Lloyd would snake the pick and roll and Boucher would like roll into his back at times. Like he just had no concept of timing in the pick and roll, which he has cleaned up immaculately. But Precious is like that. Like his sense of timing for his cuts is so elementary still at the NBA level that there were times when the lane would be open and his defender's momentum would be going the other way and he'd just stand there. There'd be other times where the defense was collapsing and that's when he would choose to run into the defense. And it's just like, I think maybe he will clean it up, but I think it will take time. That'll take a few seasons, I think. If he is going to become an impact rotation player, I think it will be at the defensive end before it will be at the offensive end.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason that his summer league highlights, like the big dunk came in transition, not on the roll. And so, something to pay attention to though, because the Raptors obviously will be looking for that. Fred VanVleet has tons of pick and roll. And that's something like he has gotten much, much better at is his passing craft in the pick and roll, whether it's to a popper, to the short roll, or to a guy in the dive. Fred VanVleet, that's in his bag now. He can find those guys, and finding a partner who can provide rim pressure through those means, as simplistic as it is, just a dive man in the pick and roll is very, very important for regular season basketball. So I'm very interested to see who pops. Chris Boucher is probably going to be the guy out of everybody. If you look at like Precious, Khem,
he's the best roller on the team.
Yeah, he's going to provide the most there. And the Raptors were very reliant on Chris Boucher last year. Like his scoring pop was way more important than anybody might have guessed at the start of the year. So, do you want to talk Boucher then, or do you have any more Precious thoughts?
Yeah, let's talk Boucher.
Okay, your
guy, man,
egg on my face
guy.
Forever.
I claimed an extreme amount of confidence in him a couple of years ago. I was a year early. But man, like everything I said might happen in 1920 did happen in 2021. And it seems like word out of training camp, again, reading between the lines, it seems like he has made huge strides. It seems like they're going to trust him with a lot more than they trusted him in the past. I'm excited. I mean, I don't expect his numbers to change significantly, but I think he'll have, more touches in transition where he actually grabs the rebound and goes. I think he'll take fewer shots that miss by 11 feet where he just doesn't see the closeout until he's already in his shooting motion. I think he's going to have a really good season. I think last year he punched above his weight pretty much all season. I think this year he might, reach the same benchmarks, and it'll be a little bit more achievable for him to reach those benchmarks.
I think it's a bit much to ask him to be a huge plus defensively. I don't think that's there, but his shot making, given his physical profile, is extremely unique. And the fact that the Raptors are running these sharp pin downs for him, and he's catching on the move and getting into shooting motion, putting it up, or they're running flares for him off of their horn stuff, right? They're running a horns flare that gets Chris Boucher a 3-point shot that he's moving into like he's JJ Redick or something. It's absurd.
He was Jaren Jackson Jr. for long stretches of last year.
Right. And if he's shooting at 35 or above from 3, they can still just keep doing that. They can hammer those plays. And I think that can be an extremely fun wrinkle. And it's a good way to also get the defense in motion with your, not necessarily decoy action, but action off the ball that makes things a little bit easier for everybody on the ball. And especially very cerebral guards like Fred VanVleet and Goran Dragic, who, and especially if Fred is going to ratchet up that mid-range shot or has added that floater package, providing that space in the middle of the floor for them to work with. Boucher being such a heat pump kind of above the break because he's not limited to the corners. That's really interesting. And then, of course, there are the things we all know about his game, which is, he's going to roll, he's going to run out in transition, and he's going to have, better court coverage as far as having, the big popping plays. And, he'll be able to get from sideline to block threes. He's going to have some big blocks getting over to pin stuff on the glass, all that kind of stuff. And his footwork in the pick and roll is probably going to be still not very good. He's going to open his hips the wrong way. He's going to be susceptible to lobs, and he won't be able to catch up because he'll have to turn himself around. All that kind of stuff is going to happen. But there's a lot of good stuff with Boucher.
I think that's why you start him, right? Because then Khem Birch can be in the pick and roll. Boucher is best as a help defender at the rim. He's best where he's not having to, to be the guy generating offense, but to be sort of a wrinkle, like you said. And I think that's the value of him starting, right? You put him alongside Birch rather than Achiuwa. And I think I mean, now you're cooking, right? You got a stew going where I think.
Do you have a 5 right now?
Yeah, I have a 5.
Okay. What's your 5?
All right. Fred. Gary Trent Jr. I want to start Dragic, but you need the shooting. You need the shooting. OG, Boucher, Khem.
I swap him. GTJ. I know he's making 16 mil, but he's on the bench for me. I think the same way the Heat always put Dragic on the bench until it was winning time because they knew the best version of the Heat involved Goran Dragic in the starting 5. I think the best version of the Raptors involves Goran Dragic in the starting 5.
I agree with that. I think Dragic.
He's a demonstrably better player than Gary Trent at this point.
Agreed.
Yeah.
On both ends.
Yes.
But Toronto needs shooting. And Trent can shoot. It's the only thing he can do better than Dragic.
Yep. And also and Gary Trent Jr. has the type of functional shooting that he's not going to be stapled to the floor where he receives the pass. He can, it's not that he's rapid coming off of, he's not running across like Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson were in Miami, but it's that if he catches the ball and the closeout comes, like he can sidestep either way.
Yep.
He can move back. He can take a dribble in and all that kind of stuff. He's not going to get to the rim, but he's just
Certainly
there are options and avenues for him to take after he gets the pass. And a good closeout isn't going to mean he can't shoot. It's going to mean
he's definitely not going to pass either.
No, he is not.
At media day, someone asked him how he was going to improve. He was like, "Oh, there's so many areas. Like I can shoot better. I can learn to dribble better. I can score better. Everything was just related to him scoring better." There's like, he didn't mention passing once. He mentioned defense a couple times, but it was like passing wasn't even on the table. Like improve at passing would be an insult to the man.
He's we'll leave the Gary Trent stuff for a little bit later because I don't have popular Gary Trent takes, unfortunately. So we'll leave them farther back. But okay, yeah. Goran. Yeah, okay. So that's our fives. I agree why you want the five. I think they can tease enough out of, particularly because I don't believe in Fred as a playmaker very much. The amount that I believe in his pull-up shooting ability, I bet a house. I bet I put everything on Fred's ability to pull up and to like really ratchet up. Especially, he's such an efficient shooter, and not even by the numbers, which he's already like a great shooter by the numbers, but my God, like his mechanics.
Oh, his mechanics, they're incredible.
He can ratchet up at any time. There's a reason why they're like, okay, move it 6 feet back. And he's like, okay, I just move it 6 feet back. A little bit extra goes into it. He's so structurally sound. So I just think like Fred, keep bumping it up, brother. That's all I ever want from him. Don't drive the ball. You're never ever.
He's just short Klay Thompson, is he not?
This is yes. These are points we've made in the past. Short Klay Thompson, fire hydrant Klay Thompson. That is Fred VanVleet. And so go ahead.
No, I was going to preempt you and say Dragic though.
Yes,
can do those things.
That's my point. Is that VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and Boucher around Birch and Dragic, who can shoot from a standstill. Occasionally will pull up. He's very effective if it's against the Raptors. Unfortunately, he's now on the team, so he doesn't get to play the Raptors and hit absurd threes anymore. But I think that there's enough shooting with that lineup, and then you start staggering Dragic and Fred VanVleet from there. Because I also really like Malachi Flynn, and I don't want him to always just be tied to Dragic's hip. I think I want a little more freedom for him too. That's why, because I think it creates the best five. And, you can get funky from there with staggering.
I think if you start Dragic, consistently, OG Anunoby has to get up like 7, 8 threes a game. Like OG has to be a volume shooter this year. Actually, whether or not you start Dragic, here's the take.
I just want volume. Man.
Volume everything, but man, he was getting into those like slithery threes, pump fake, one dribble threes, step back. He was starting to get into those, like add a little bit of motion before a shot. If he can keep that up, if he can add even more, like I think he was usually going, back to the left. If he adds the other direction as well for hitting his threes after a dribble, there's no reason why he couldn't get up that number of threes.
OG can shoot. He can shoot from a standstill, and he can shoot moving side to side. Like he can pound dribble into open space and get the shot up, and he'll be hovering around 40%. There's just no way he won't. He has a tougher time with momentum going forward.
Yes.
Like,
That's when they go crazy.
Everything gets a little bit slumpy. It's like the different parts of his body divorce from one another. All of a sudden, he becomes very truncated when he's moving forward and trying to shoot. That's why the mid-range stuff gets a little bit hairy every once in a while. But OG attacking off of closeouts with Goran Dragic Goran Dragic will provide rim pressure. Of course, he's not over the hill, but he's maybe on the hill, right? Like Goran Dragic is he's awesome, but he's on the hill. He's an older guard now. But he can still get to the rim. He can still create rim pressure and get guys in rotation. I just want to see OG Anunoby put the ball on the floor off of closeouts and stuff like that, and then also ratchet up next to one of Fred or Goran in those transitional lineups, pick and roll possessions for him. That's what I want. But mostly I want him to put the ball on the floor against a rotating defense. And I think Goran gives him the best ability.
You want to take?
Yeah, always.
Goran Dragic was on the 1920 Raptors. They win the championship.
Yeah, sure.
That's a take.
Totally. That's kind of similar. That's akin to my Gallinari on the 18-19 76ers. They win the championship. Like if they trade, if they go to the Clippers and say, give us Gallo, not give us Tobias Harris, I think they win the chip. Maybe. Well, who cares?
Wow, that's okay. I want to talk about that after we stop recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dragic is good. I think, I mean, we may be moving, too quickly off of OG. I want to talk a little bit more about OG. So do you want me to hold on to my Dragic take, or do you want me to?
No, let's finish Dragic and we'll do a whole OG thing. Like OG obviously is going to get his time. He is. So he is shining beacon of hope.
I wrote about Dragic actually before the 1920 year, saying that the Raptors should try to steal him from Miami. The guy does, like, his strengths are exactly what Toronto's weaknesses are. There's a reason why he was the closing off scorer for Miami in the playoffs. Like, Butler actually wasn't scoring all the buckets down the clutch. It was Dragic. And he's super strong. He gets in like that 6 to 8 foot range, and he throws up those weird, like, body going one way, arm going the other way, like floaters, and draws and ones all the time. Great finisher, pretty good passer. He's just he's an extremely good offensive player. And yes, last year was a down year. 2021 was definitely a step back for him, particularly in the playoffs, which is where he's always been better in the playoffs than the regular season until last year. So that is concerning. But, if that was just a blip, and if he can, regain what he was before, then the Raptors Dragic could be actually the hinge of what makes them good.
Yeah, that's when the Heat were making their run to the finals. They had a different leading scorer for every single round of the playoffs. Hero, miraculously, I believe, in the Eastern Conference Finals. Jimmy Butler in the finals. The second round, I believe, was Bam Adebayo, and the first round was Goran Dragic. And that is each according to their ability, each according to their need. Goran Dragic has an uncanny ability to rise to the occasion and to kind of fit into whatever mold is needed by his team, because he's his feel for what to do on the basketball court is extremely high. And he's more capable than he looks at all points in time. He is more capable than he looks. That is why his 3-point shot is so frustrating when you play against him. You're like, this guy doesn't shoot threes. Then he hits threes. And you have to coil your fists and just shake in anger, something like that. And he's always getting to the rim. He doesn't appear to be fast, but he has guile and he has feel. His sense of how to operate in the middle of the floor is really, really great. And he plays off. Yes, craft. That's right. And he plays off of other cerebral players very well. Why do we think he fit in so well with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo? That would do great next to Fred VanVleet. And also, hell yeah, I think Fred VanVleet, Goran Dragic's 2-man actions would just slap so hard. I think they'd be so much fun.
I agree. You're starting to convince me, to be honest. I just Toronto's shooting is going to be sketchy this year without Kyle.
Well, they're going to be high variance no matter what.
Yeah, and Trent,
the team is doomed to that.
Yeah. I mean, when was the last time they had a low variance? DeMar was the last time they had a low variance player. But and
Pascal to some degree. Pascal's more high variance than DeMar, but Pascal in the regular season, he's still he's going to get you 19, and he's
that's fair. That's fair.
55% true shooting. It's workable efficiency,
But Dragic brings up that floor in a way that no one else does until Pascal comes back. I'm with you. I'm with you. All right, you've changed my 5. I say start Dragic now.
Well, that's why the Raptors are like, will not be buying him out. He's actually pretty damn good at basketball. Like if someone wants to come correct with a trade, then we'll think about it. But Dragic, if he got bought out and went to whatever team he wanted, that is of significantly more consequence than all the everybody throwing their hands in the air about Griffin and Aldridge and stuff to the Nets last year. Dragic is really damn good.
Oh, I eked a whole piece about how Blake Griffin was exceptional last year.
Well, he was, but Dragic is better. That's not Dragic anti-Blake sentiment. This is pro-Dragic sentiment. What did you think about his I don't want to be on the Raptors thing, just to get your thoughts on it?
I don't know. I don't want to offend anyone. I thought it was an extremely inoffensive take from Dragic.
I thought so too. And
he's been in the league forever. Like he's allowed to say where he wants to be, you know? And as soon as Toronto indicated at the time, every report was he was going to Dallas immediately. Like it was just going to be part of the deal. And as soon as the news broke that that wasn't part of the deal, he said, "Oh, then I would love to be in Toronto." You know, he has handled himself with nothing but class the entire time, even including that moment.
I thought it was funny because I did not see one Raptors fan say they actually wanted Goran Dragic. But then once he said he didn't also want to, well, because when they traded for him, everybody wanted young pieces in the Heat trade. Like that's what they wanted.
Dragic is better than Tyler Hero.
Absolutely is. Absolutely is. But the Raptors seem to be fashioning themselves towards some sort of youth movement. Anyway, like that's the idea, right? Like Bobby Webster is trying to piece together everybody's 6'8" and 22 years old, and you know it's just like hell on the floor for anybody else, including those partaking.
May I ask? Yeah, that's true. It's the trenches for both sides. May I ask why you said Bobby Webster in that sentence rather than Masai?
You know, I think Bobby.
You think this is his vision?
I think this is Bobby's vision.
Interesting.
I think like give Masai all the money. Like he's got some weight to throw around if, you know, bargaining or whatever is happening. But I think like the team is fundamentally different now than many years under Masai. And I don't even think Masai was like that married to, you know, making Kyle the best guy on the floor because he kept trying to trade him every damn year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think that Bobby, like Masai is obviously a piece of stuff, but I think it seems like Bobby is getting his shot to kind of see out his vision for the Raptors. That seems, or at least he has a much larger part of seeing out whatever the vision is. Like Bobby, no doubt, obviously in the day-to-day has taken on a much bigger role in, you know, the recent year. But going forward, it seems like that will also be the case.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That deserves its own podcast. I really want to talk about how we think the division of vision goes between the two of them. But let's keep going through the Raptors.
Yeah, I think this is Bobby's squad. That's what I think. Now, of course, that's, by the way, reckless speculation. I'll say that. I don't have anybody, you know, coming from the Raptors organization and telling me Bobby Webster, he's the guy now. Masai Ujiri, he's just there for appearances. They're paying him like $26 million a year for appearances, something like that. And no, nothing like that has been said to me. But I do think enough has changed around the Raptors that I think they're adhering to somebody else's basketball philosophy. I could be wrong. In fact, I wouldn't suggest anybody stake a claim on my behalf. Please don't. It'll be deeply, deeply embarrassing for both of us. But okay. Let's do Gary Trent, and then we'll finish off with like OG and Scottie, giving them their due, and then we'll talk like partially guaranteed in two ways and Malachi and those types of.
We're about a quarter of the way through this thing.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Gary Trent Jr. Thoughts?
The man can shoot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, me too. When he got traded to the Raptors, and I was like, okay, Gary Trent Jr., I didn't see him play against the Raptors. I think he was injured in the one game. Yeah. And most of my memories were of the bubble, and he had a hell of a stretch in the bubble. And it it created a lot of goodwill for him, especially defensively. He appears to be a graduate of the school of like Rajon Rondo, Patrick Beverly, like, pull up the shorts, slap the floor, like
Oh,
look,
yeah.
like try hard defense, like pick up full court randomly.
Avery
Bradley. And all those guys have had really great defensive seasons. Gary Trent Jr. hasn't yet. And in fact, was actually quite poor on that end for the Raptors. Tough scheme to fit into, admittedly, to just kind of jump in, especially at, the mix of the guard and wing position. But so his help defense appears kind of toothless right now. And his point of attack defense can be quite underwhelming. That being said, the man can shoot the hell out of the basketball. Really, really, he can. 17 of 19 game. He can just catch fire. But he also, with the Raptors, shot less than 40% from the floor. He provides little to no potency when he puts the ball on the ground and starts moving towards the bucket. Teams can expect a medium efficiency mid-range jumper, but if he's going to the rim, it's a disaster for the Raptors. It's just as likely to be a turnover as it is. Well, it's actually more likely to be a turnover than it is an assist. And, he doesn't have that many counters in his bag. But three-point shooting is super important. And if he starts to a more efficient fashion, like his selection of how to apply his talents starts to get better, there's obviously a bunch of value he can provide to the Raptors, especially with a preseason, a training camp, understanding the defense a little bit more. Sure. But on its face, Gary Trent Jr. has very little from the eye test and by the numbers to indicate that he is that he is a high quality starter in the NBA. Like he'll punch up at like an okay starter, it seems.
Yeah. If he repeats the same year as last season for his time in Toronto, it would constitute a disaster. Like, yes, maybe his defense was because he didn't understand the schemes, but toothless was a good word for his help defense. If he was there, it didn't really impact the guy. Offensively, the best hope, if he put the ball on the floor, the best hope was that he would take a step back jumper. How is that the best outcome? If a guy puts the ball, somebody putting the ball on the floor should be an offensive win, right? Because it means you're threatening the defense, you're getting closer to the rim. Like there are so many reasons that should be a win. For Trent, it was a disaster. As soon as he dribbled, it was a disaster. I mean, if he repeats that, we were talking about different parlays that could result in success or failure. That's a big one, right? I was talking about Khem Birch being a great defender. That's a big one. I think equally important, dictating the year. And I think Birch probably will be a great defender. I think Trent probably will be a huge negative. And that is a parlay to the negative. I'm mixing my metaphors at this point. But, the odds of him turning it around and becoming better, maybe in 5 years, yes, sure, great. But this season, the odds of him improving at those very elements, I think are unlikely. And I think his minutes need to be smartly schemed.
That's a good way of putting it. And by the way, if you get a contract, you've earned it in the NBA. Like, make as much money as you possibly can. I was surprised that Gary Trent Jr. was able to earn as big a contract as he got. Why? Because there is very little that he appears to be able to do that can make him a lot more valuable on the court other than just shoot a higher percentage from three. And just asking guys to just ratchet that up to like Joe Harris levels or something like that. And Joe Harris
40%, 50%, 60%.
Like, right. And Joe Harris is like probably a better defender than Gary Trent as well.
Yes.
Just what other steps? And when he got traded to the Raptors, I watched like a bunch of Portland games, and then I watched like his first 10 games with the Raptors, and I was like, man, it, as you said, when he's putting the ball on the floor, there's nothing happening here. This is a guy who's extremely limited to just the 3-point shot. He looks great, but he is relative to his peers. He's not very athletic, especially at, the spot he plays on the floor. Like he does not have a quick first step. He's got slow foot speed. He can't really get up. And, he's a slow fella for his position who can shoot it. I am worried about the impending negative that he might be on the floor as well.
He's a self-creator. That was the contract, right? He's a self-creator in the way his craft at getting to his own shot, no matter which direction he's going, could already be, one of the best on the team. It's a thing they lack.
Which is a thing an indictment of the team, more so than I think a nod to Gary Trent.
Definitely, but it is also one of the most difficult skills in the league. And the fact that he has it, you talked about you earn the contract you get. I completely agree with you. And why did he earn that contract? Because we're kind of ragging on the man, right? Why did he earn that contract? Because he is extremely good at this one skill. That's a very difficult skill to have.
I hate to be the guy ragging, but like extremely good to describe that skill for him is also
relative to his teammates.
Yeah, right. Like how many guys on the Raptors can get the ball off the inbounds, take like a drag screen and turn it into a pull-up three? Like there's less than 5 guys on the Raptors who can do that. And Gary Trent Jr. is one of them. And
that's 2. Is there not?
Pascal, if he's fully healthy.
It's Fred and Gary.
Pascal, if he's fully healthy, like he had like maybe like a 250 sample of being able to do that at like 34%, which is also of a similar number to Gary Trent, which is why it's kind of like, damn, but
that's good. 34% on that shot is good. That's like an extremely, that's good.
Yep. That allows you to influence how defenses play you. And that's also another thing, like Caitlin Cooper wrote just a fantastic article about how defenses are more influenced by what they think shooters are than what shooters actually are. And yes, 538.
She's my teammate now.
Yeah, I didn't even shout you out for where you wrote at the start of this, by the way. Louis writes at the 538, which is like incredibly well-respected publication. It's fantastic. It comes a very close second to Minute Basketball as far as well-respected publication.
You're exaggerating the closeness. It comes a distant second to Minute Basketball.
Right. But and she used Eric Gordon as like the main piece to make that point. Eric Gordon, a guy you and I just love. And but yeah, and Gary Trent Jr. is a guy who will always engender worry in defenders when he's shooting from behind the floor. And the 3-point shot is king in the NBA right now. So I've been in this conversation about Gary taking for granted a little bit the potency of the 3 and kind of belaboring the rest of his game. So if you're pissed at me, I understand. But I am lower on Gary than I think a lot of people.
I could never be pissed at you. I know you were addressing the listener, but
okay. I feel like we went hard enough on Gary Trent Jr. Perhaps too hard. And now we're going to talk about Scottie, and then we'll give OG his full. God, I don't know. This podcast could be 3 hours?
Love it.
Yeah, and then we'll give OG his full due. Scottie Barnes. Hell yeah, right? Some people would have liked Suggs, obviously. A video via Raptors Republic went semi-viral because of the draft party and everyone saying like, yeah, it got passed around quite a bit because there was a huge party of people watching the draft, and when Scottie got drafted, they're like, oh no, God. And you were there, Louis.
Yeah, I was there. I was kind of surprised, to be honest, by that reaction.
You didn't have a reaction that would get you in trouble. I'll say that much. You were like,
I didn't react at all because I'm not a draft guy, so I didn't really know
because you
I knew who they were.
You knew who they were picking.
I just didn't have an opinion. I'm not a draft guy. I learn who they are after they come to the Raptors, and then I dive in. But here, I'll tell you what I've learned. Scottie's the man.
The man.
I mean, like that guy, we talk about, different possibilities that could lead to different seasons. And Scottie could just be incredible. Like he could have a rookie level impact that OG Anunoby had, where he started and was just a plus. He was immediately one of the best defenders on that Raptors team. Remember when OG Anunoby started, it was like, oh, we finally found a small forward to put next to DeMar DeRozan. It was the first time, right? And never again will Jason Capono like slander up our floors. And Scottie Barnes, you know, there are scenarios where he starts and can't go back to playing fewer than 20 minutes a game. Like, yeah, when Pascal gets back, I don't see it many scenarios where he starts, but like he could immediately become a part of the rotation, become an important defender, and figure it out on the offensive end, right? There are scenarios where that happens. That's not likely, but that's possible.
If it's funky enough, we start Scottie at the 2. That's what I'm saying. Fred, Scottie, OG, Pascal, and for length, we don't go with Khem. We go with Chris Boucher, just for the meme of it all.
He's longer.
Just for Bobby Webster's dream, as per Samson Folk.
Scottie is, I mean, he has maybe the longest wingspan on the team.
Relative to his height?
Absolute.
Oh, wow. I thought Pascal.
It's 7'4", isn't it?
Ooh, that would be that's pretty gargantuan. Chris Boucher's is.
Oh yeah, Boucher is the longest.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, Boucher is longer. Never mind.
Certainly, like he's outspanning Pascal and OG
and you know, and Khem. I think I may be wrong about that. Khem is a ridiculous wingspan, but
Boucher is 7'4" and some change. So even that, he's a long.
Maybe
fella.
He's not 7'4". I don't know. Anyway, my point is, I mean, it is clear the ways in which he could help, right? Like just looking at the guy, watching the way he's played defense. I mean, some of these clips from him playing in runs over the summer, there's one where he just annihilated Tim Hardaway Jr. Like, and I know, you know, pay no mind to these videos unless, you know, it's Scottie Barnes annihilating Tim Hardaway Jr. in isolation. Like I think he could be a plus defender as a rookie, which is very rare, but super possible, I think.
Devin Vassell just did it last year. Like, and Devin Vassell doesn't have the same advantages physically that Scottie does in some areas. And we just have to see how Scottie applies his defensive feel to that end of the floor for the Raptors. That's a huge thing. That's what my biggest thing is. Like, centers are more important defensively than, if we're looking at recent years, than basically any other spot on the floor. Your proximity to the rim is a big deal. Centers also just basically are never positives when they're young. Why? Because you play on a certain size basketball court your whole life and you play center. It's one step to get to this spot from here your whole life, and then suddenly it's a step and a half. And not having that half step in the NBA is that sucks.
It's death. Yeah, that's death.
And so young guys, especially the big ones, their relation to space defensively just changes so dramatically. And guards, they play like man on man for a lot, and they track. So it's of less consequence because you're tied to how the guy is moving elsewhere. So you just mimic him, mirror him. But Scottie is a guy who, you know, similarly to Pascal, you're like, this guy could cover a lot of ground. Like there's a lot of potential for court coverage here. And if you watch, like at Florida State, picking up a point guard full court is very impressive. Can he do that against NBA point guards? Most of the guys I talk to that are scouts, some of them now work for NBA teams. Some of them are now heads of like research and development. Guys who know their stuff, they said no. Does that mean he can't? Absolutely not. Maybe he will do it, but their thoughts were that's probably not something we'll see. Most guys can't guard point guards at their size. OG Anunoby does it for like 6 possessions of a game, and he's like, God damn, that was difficult. These guys are quick. And yeah, so that's really interesting for Scottie Barnes, is like how he applies his defense, because he's already very clearly headed on the right direction to be fantastic at it. But when guys are big, it's just so much different at the NBA level. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns, was a defense first prospect coming out of Kentucky, and now is, you know, a generational offensive talent, and everybody's belaboring his defense. So the application to the NBA is so important, and I really can't wait to see how Scottie does it, because I'm very high on his defense. The most interesting aspect of his game is probably the offense, because he is severely limited in some ways, but you can't tell his brain that. No, you cannot. He is not limited whatsoever. He has no threshold that he can hit. He there's no ceiling on his game to him. He just does.
Which is amazing for the
Yes.
future and devastating for the present.
Well, the Raptors haven't had a guy like that, really, right? Like OG Anunoby, everybody is
He's the opposite
begging
of that.
to see more. It's like, OG, you might have the potential to do, and we'll get into this, very big things. And there are little indicators that suggest this is, you know, a sleeping dragon, even offensively, that kind of stuff. And Scottie Barnes is like, I'm either a dragon or I am not. I will not be sleeping. Like,
Yes,
that's his whole thing, right?
that was a big flex, by the way. I talk to important people. Well, I spend all day talking to my dog. And she tells me, can you see her? Yeah, you got her now.
Yeah, she's hanging out.
She tells me that Scottie Barnes is going to translate. So I don't know. I don't know who to trust.
Well, the people of the podcast got to listen to those people as well. So, like,
Yeah. You've had some. I'm following some impressive guests. Anyway, I'm glad you mentioned his offense, because I'm extremely confident his defense will translate. Maybe not, to be applied in the ways that, switch onto a guard. Maybe it'll just translate in that he'll play his position like a normal player will, and he'll be good at that. Maybe I think that's the minimum, probably the most likely scenario for a rookie. Offensively,
sorry, just on the defense thing, we have seen the rise of incredibly important nail defenders in the NBA. Jason Tatum basically is a near all defense level defender, basically because of the way he plays the nail. Robert Covington was never an on-ball guy. That was never his bag. He was an incredible nail defender. And those two guys have been recognized as extremely important defenders. Scottie Barnes could be just a monster at the nail. Like, he could be super affecting. He might wall off a side of the floor. You know what I mean? So that's something to really look forward to. I'm less excited about like the flashes against Tim Hardaway, which is cool, but I'm excited for when it seems like, if Jalen Brunson is dribbling into the paint, he's like, God damn, I cannot get the ball to the right side of the floor right now because Scottie Barnes is looming. That's what I want.
Pascal Siakam used to do this thing where he doesn't anymore because he doesn't try on defense anymore unless it's in the playoffs, which is fine. But I know that's a lie. I see your face right now. But he doesn't do this thing I'm about to describe anymore. He used to do this thing where it would be a empty side pick and roll, and he would not be involved in the pick and roll, but he'd just go onto that side of the floor anyway. And so it would be three defenders on the side, on this like weaks on the strong side with two offensive players, just saying like move it to the weak side, and he would just be there. He would just like teleport over, and you'd have to reset. And like this pick and roll would just be a waste of 6 seconds on the shot clock. I think Scottie Barnes can do that. He can probably do that today, right? Like that is some weird, funky stuff that if I was coaching and I saw someone try that, I would be like, if it works, I'll never say anything again. But if it doesn't work, like I'll cut you. Like you'll never play on this team again if this doesn't work. That's just an insane thing to do. And Barnes could do that.
Excellent point. Ooh. And that's why I bring you on, Louis. That's a Hall of Fame anecdote. I come on to say that, Scottie Barnes either is or isn't a dragon. You'll know. And you say,
no, I like that more.
Pascal used to overload the weak side pick and rolls as a defender because he knew his court coverage was so supreme. He could get back. God bless you. That's a great anecdote.
Thanks, buddy.
Offense.
There's a small window that he's a good offensive player this year.
Pretty tight.
What has to happen for that to be the case?
The Raptors have to generate an absurd amount of turnovers, and Scottie Barnes has to be running with them a lot.
That's possible.
And that 3-point shot because again, he's going to shoot it. He's going to shoot the ball. There's no doubt in my mind. Scotty's going to shoot it. If he clears like 32%, that we are taking victory laps.
Huge win.
Yeah.
We're going streaking out through the gymnasium down to the quad.
Well, and that's Blake and I had talked about this before when we were comparing and contrasting Pascal, is that Pascal is a very good passer. Like I talked about this earlier in the podcast, a really, really great playmaker for his position, and even creeping up towards the league over. He's a great playmaker, but that's something he developed largely in the NBA. You know,
Barnes already has that.
Right. Barnes coming out of Florida State is a significantly more polished and gifted playmaker than Pascal was coming out of New Mexico. And so that's pretty cool, is like if you get Scottie Barnes in some broken plays, which a lot of his best playmaking highlights in Florida State were off of broken plays when the defense is just whatever, lanes are opening and closing constantly, and Barnes is picking the right ones. You're like, wow, that's pretty damn impressive at his size, his build. And to see him doing that, I'm excited to see when he gets to play against a shifted defense in the NBA and see what comes of that. I think there's going to be some super, super funky dump off passes that are made to Khem, to OG, because OG's 45 cuts and baseline cuts are just like perfection. And Khem also has a pretty keen sniffer for the dunker spot as well. I'm excited to see that kind of stuff. There's going to be some sprayed cross-court passes. Inevitably, there's going to be some one-armed bounce passes in transition. He's going to try it all. And I'm excited to see how much he hits on. And if he just is hitting on everything, then you start to really recalibrate what Scottie Barnes might be. Because if he starts hitting that early, then he also gets to progress at the rate that he's more comfortable with in other areas.
I think the context in which the team exists is not great for that exact thing to happen. I think having more shooters around him on the floor, like if Pascal was a 36% shooter again, 35%, if Khem Birch could hit corner threes, that would be huge for Barnes' development, but also just like how he looks, like what the texture of him being on the floor feels like, smells like, tastes like, like, but that's not the case. I don't think Birch is going to be a good corner 3-point shooter. I don't think Pascal is going to be flying off screens and drilling threes. I mean, maybe he'll be adequate, but not the type of shooter that I think Barnes needs to really make him smell wonderful.
Yes, the effervescence will not be there yet.
Yeah. And so, that's where I think certain lineups, like put them alongside Fred, Trent, OG, and Boucher, right? Watch them, put the ball in his hands, like run him. Fred is like a screener, and he could do some tasty stuff, right? Maybe Boucher is a screener. You want to get weird, but like I think the minutes that he might get early on might often downplay his dragonness, but there will be some funky lineups that let the dragon shine through.
In the words of Henry Ward, who came on this podcast to describe his vision for the Raptors and also appealed to that same rim protection by means of preventative lane closing, the same way you said. Like he was like, maybe that's the path that the Raptors will follow, particularly with Scottie Barnes in tow. But he refers to what the Raptors are going to be this year as a funk fest. And let it begin. Let's get funky. That's like the whole sell on Scottie Barnes is let's get funky. And he's a cool kid too. He is. You got to root for him.
Oh, they love him. He seems like he's already like he's. I was on media day. Everyone stepped up and said, "Love Scottie. He's the funniest man in the world. He's great. He's a great team." Vivek leaned over. He's like, "Is this the most charismatic man in the world?" Like, it was crazy. I mean, you rant about a star rookie, right? You talk about how good he is. You don't have to talk about how funny he is. Like, you don't say that unless it's true.
Yeah, OG. He has not surpassed OG for me because OG has been carrying on a bit for almost like 5 years now. My respect for bits is really, really high. And
It's a
OG is
Norm
still
Macdonald
doing it.
level gag.
Yes. Rest in peace, Norm. He's got some excellent jokes out there. He's told a lot of funny ones. But anyway, let's do OG then. OG
Let's do OG.
Anunoby. Okay, so if you listen to the podcast every episode, then you would have heard PD Webb talk about. I asked him to make the case for OG Anunoby as a primary creator for this year. And so basically he appealed to a few things. OG Anunoby's ability to shoot it, his immense brutish strength, and there is in the scout and analysis community a growing sentiment of how important strength creation is.
Wait, that's only growing?
Only growing.
That's stupid. Strength is obviously important and always has been. Sorry, keep going.
No. But like strength creation. For example, why Kyle Lowry was so underrated as a driver is because the markers for strength creation weren't properly identified within him.
Oh,
That's what I mean.
see.
Not just strength alone, but guys who are clearing space going down.
Yeah.
Not in
my
the
mistake.
not in the simplistic Zion Williamson way where it's like, oh, holy hell. But guys who like Jaden Springer, who got drafted
like
this year,
Zion Williamson, who also leverages it perfectly.
Yeah, and somehow gets gravity out of it. Good Lord. And but anyway, like strength creation and OG Anunoby, if you watch like a particular game against the Pacers, when he just absolutely bodied Domantas Sabonis, who is also a very large man, and OG Anunoby continues to body big dudes like that, gather and boom. And if OG doesn't bail on his own balance, like step outside of his center of gravity, which he does too often, but if he stays within himself and appeals to his own strength to leverage against everybody else, things get pretty hairy for the opposing team when he's going downhill, especially if there's a little bit more craft and control introduced there, which is something that he needs to work on and show that he can do, a few times a game. The potential is there though. And he has really long strides. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a guy who, when he picks up the ball like 6 inches inside the 3-point line, okay, he picked up the ball, but he has forward momentum and suddenly he's at the rim. You're kind of like shaking your head going, oh, what the hell is happening here? How is Shai at the bucket? OG Anunoby has a similar gift, although he is less slinky, he is more bulldozy as he does it. But the stride lengths are the same. If he picks up the ball with forward momentum inside the arc, there's a good chance he can get all the way to the bucket. He is a good finisher there. There are really strange occurrences that happen with OG where he loses all semblance of coordination. That is true. But for the most part, he is a strong enough and coordinated enough guy that he is a good finisher at the rim. All that mixed with a guy who shoots like 40% at the rim, 40% from three, it could get pretty funky with what you're asking him to do as far as create advantages against other teams. And the fact that over the course of his career, we've seen a guy who makes the right pass when the defense steps up towards him. Like he's got a pretty good underhand shovel pass. He's got a keen sniffer for the dunker spot, who Khem Birch has a keen sniffer for the dunker spot as the receiver. OG could sniff him out. It's a lot of nose interplay, but he'll get the ball there. That kind of stuff. And it seems like OG's strengths are so immense that if if the rising tide of his game picks up the boats of his passing to the corner and his pull-up, things can get pretty interesting pretty quick. I am not that high on OG. That is the case you would make, though, for why OG could be a guy who gets close to like 22 points per game or something like that. I'm more interested in just attacking closeouts and really making teams pay like hell when he gets to come off the weak side, all that kind of stuff, because he is just such an immensely powerful man that if he has downhill momentum and he can just avoid charges, that should be like 8 points off of closeouts every single game, something to that effect.
Glad you mentioned charges because he that bulldozy.
Oh yeah.
He just, in the past, he does not know how to wield it. It's like, I'm going to hit this hammer over here. If you're under it, that's your fault.
Yep.
Yeah, I buy all of that. I think, I love that stride. I mean, the stride thing I wouldn't have thought about, but as soon as you said it in my head, I pictured him driving. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a beautiful point.
But yeah, PD said if somebody's on his hip, he's actually behind him, which is a really, really positive indicator for guys who drive to the rim. That's the thing. Yeah.
I think, you taught me what arm deceleration was a long time ago, and release points and, all those different avenues of finishing. And he is an excellent finisher despite having more or less one finish.
Yes.
Like Siakam was an elite finisher.
But he's still because like 69% last year. So it's not, I'm such a fan.
Oh, no.
I'll shut up.
No, was an elite finisher because he had like 20 different finishes. The reason why he is a good finisher now, I think, is different from the reason why he was good in like 18, 19. I'm not saying the fact that he is great it was the reason why he's great is different. But if Anunoby were to develop that craft, I mean, there's all sorts of ifs, right? Like if he were to develop that craft, there's no telling what he could be, right? Like the handle is one thing that seems to be improving quickly. I mean, especially towards the end of last year, he had some individual possessions where, he could shake a guy who is static. But I think at the very least, at the bare minimum, he is going to be a norm level weak side attacker where it's like, if he gets space, if the defense forgets him, it's a bucket. It just is, right? That's the best shot you can imagine. Either he takes an open three or he drives against a moving defense. It's game over. That's what Norm was at his peak. I think that's what OG is at his absolute bottom.
Yeah, that's when you watch OG play and you realize last year he was 60% true shooting and 16 points a game, and he looked like he could never be bothered to score.
Yeah, didn't want to.
Like Pascal Siakam at 21 points per game, he only scored 5 more points per game than OG last year. But we were like, God damn, this guy is trying to get his own offense.
He worked, man. He worked.
He's working really hard. And OG is sleepwalking to 16 points. And then we'll have a game here or there where he gets like 33 because he's like, you know what? I'm going to try off the bounce stuff. And I guess they've decided to play a center on me. He has like 14 points in the first quarter and 21 by the end of the first half. And then he hits threes the rest of the game because they've adjusted the defensive scheme, something like that. But very rarely is OG impressing himself upon the game offensively. Defensively, he's always an immense factor. But that's the interesting part, is that there are statistical indicators that suggest he can ratchet up, of course, but it's important that players actually do that. There's been a lot of players in the NBA who have hit like 60% true shooting, and they've been around that 15 points per game. They've slid in perfectly next to guys who account for higher usage, and they've just never been able to topple that usage problem. They have a threshold with themselves. They don't like to play that style of basketball. And seeing if OG can kind of override the wiring that has dominated his play style offensively for the first however many years of his career, that is very intriguing. And if he hits, and this is where we're talking about outcomes, how likely they are, stacking them. If you stack the outcomes, OG becomes the best player on the team, likely.
Yep.
But you have to stack unlikely outcomes. The likelihood of a couple of those outcomes stacking seems within the realm of possibilities that he becomes, an all-star a few times in his career. And all-stars are good, man. I like watching all-stars.
It's hard.
And OG seems like a guy, maybe not this year, but a guy who can get there and probably will have the best contract in the NBA. That's not like a rookie deal. He's just got a great contract, like team friendly.
He's very underpaid.
I can't believe he didn't get like 24 a year. Crazy to me.
If you flip his role with Siakam's role on offense, put Siakam back where he was in the championship season, where he's getting, until the playoffs, he's getting guys second, third best defenders. He's attacking rotations. advantages are already created for him, smart cuts, and you put OG as the guy who has to do something. I mean, I don't think OG would transition well to that. I don't think he's ready for that.
That's the thing. But that's also why I'm resigned to the Raptors not really being super good, because I expect the start of the year is going to be hell.
This is where I was going with it. But
take it there then, yeah.
He's going to be doing it anyway because the Raptors start the year without Siakam. So, I mean, what if he struggles for a month, gets okay at it? He can get his usage up to 21, 22%. That's so gets his usage up to about 20%. And can maintain some of his efficiency. I mean, if that happens, what an ideal scenario for Siakam to return to, right? Like how perfect we talked about how to make the system work for Siakam about 4.5 hours ago. We mentioned that. Like that's the way for that to happen. We didn't talk about specific ways other than play calling, which was interesting. But another way to get there, aside from play calling, is just OG wakes up as the dragon that he could be, and starts bodying guys. Like he gets that weird funky post thing going, his pull-up shot, he gets other release point. Like there's other ways to unleash Siakam, and one of them is OG becoming who he can, who his destiny, fulfilling his destiny. There we go. God damn, that took a while to get it.
I think it would be really interesting, just if I'm thinking about how they structure like an offensive set, if Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby occupy the same side of the floor and Pascal Siakam occupies the other one, if the ball is in Pascal Siakam's hand and they know, okay, Fred and OG are sharing the same side of the floor, OG has started to kind of impose his will on his primary defenders, they can't have the big help side guy creep over as much, because that puts them in a position where OG will have single coverage and presumably a lane to the rim, or means to create a lane to the rim. And if Fred is sharing the same side as OG, they can't have the little guy slide in for a charge anymore, because OG has shown when the defense sinks in, he can make the pass, he can pass it out, and Fred is a hell of a shooter. Just something as simple as that. And also OG, like I talked about that horn sets aren't the end all be all, okay? But like the Raptors ran a really nice horn set last year. Chris Finch installed it and it was nice and I liked it. And OG can slide right in there where Kyle Lowry was. And you put those guys in decisions where the structure of the set creates the advantages for them. They don't have to create it. It's because they're moving well off ball, and they're getting like brush screens and that kind of stuff to create little inherent advantages, and let them make the decisions like that. I just can't wait.
So the other element about, adding usage to OG is he is their best or second best catch and shoot shooter, right? Maybe the maybe the size gives him a little bit of an edge over Fred. Probably not. Second best. Let's say second best.
If Fred just got to focus on like the same things that OG got to focus on, I think Fred would shoot like 49% as a catch and shoot guy.
I agree with that. He is also their best short roller.
Oh, he's so good.
I talked to Nick Nurse about this last year because I was like, he is one of the best on your team when he's standing really far away from the rim. And he is also one of the best on your team when he's standing much closer to the rim. How do you choose where to put a guy? And he had a really interesting answer about, diverse offense. It was exactly what you'd expect. But on top of that, he is their best zone, like poppers, you know what I mean, right? Where he goes into the middle of the floor. And he is also probably their best cutter from the weak side.
Yes, absolutely.
And so
he is.
All of those elements have one thing in common, and they involve not starting with the ball. And I do worry though, if the Raptors try to force feed Anunoby, they try to foie gras him and make him swole up and become the dragon that we envision. What are you losing as a team where this player who is the best or second best at so many of these other skills is no longer on the at the able to do them at least as a first option look on the floor.
I've eaten foie gras, and I called it foie gras. So that's
Saskatchewan boy. You can take the boy out of Saskatchewan. You can't take the Saskatchewan out of the boy.
It's
Got
like,
you.
Brad Pitt.
I'm still sharp 6 hours into this podcast.
Yeah, Inglourious Bastards. It's buongiorno. It's me.
Yeah, buongiorno.
I'll have the foie gras.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. But anyway, okay, that's something I touched on last year when I was writing about OG and that big piece I wrote on him with like I wrote about how in the structure of their sets, OG was always spacing. And, that's a real thing. It's like, do teams just overload like hell because, maybe this is a Gary Trent thing. But do teams just overload like hell because he's no longer occupying the weak side? That's an interesting wrinkle. Yeah.
That's why it would be easier to have 2 OG Anunobys. Rather than 1.
Would you rather have 3? We could do 3.
Yeah, that would be best. But that's where Scottie Barnes comes in, right? Like maybe Barnes can simulate some of this on the ball. And this is the Bobby Webster vision. It's like these guys are all so good at so many things. We talked about Pascal and OG flipping roles. Maybe Scottie steps in. That's the point of having so many of them. We've talked for 11 hours now, and we understand Bobby Webster we're about halfway through.
Okay, so I'll say this much. Justin Champagny and David Johnson. Those are the two-way contracts. Your partial contracts for the Raptors. Yuta Watanabe, $375,000 guaranteed. Sam Decker, $350,000 guaranteed. Ish Wainwright, $250K guaranteed. Isak Bonga, $200K guaranteed. Freddie Gillespie, big shout out, I guess, Scottie Barnes' dad, as per Freddie Gillespie, $50K guaranteed. And Reggie Perry, I do not have I'm sure Blake has a spreadsheet somewhere. Maybe I should have asked, but I don't have the Reggie Perry info yet. Okay. So Utah.
I assume Exhibit 10. So.
Oh yeah, good call.
50,000 guaranteed, right?
That wouldn't surprise me. Yes. Also, like a funny wrinkle, as we talked about earlier, but Khem Birch is the only listed center, by the way. And, he's been listed as a forward in the past. So the Bobby Webster vision, by the way, strong. Forwards. Okay, so Yuta Watanabe should be on the team unless something disastrous has happened to his game. Not to mention, he balled out in the Olympics. He had a very good Olympics.
Oh, yeah. Part of the closeout.
That's right. And, okay, so let's do Utah. Do you think there's an open window for him? Because last year he seized a small window that became larger and larger because of the turmoil that the Raptors found themselves in throughout the year. But this year, obviously, there's a little bit more of mindfulness with development for some guys. What do we think of Utah and what he might do with the Raptors this year?
You're going to hate me, but probably no. I don't think there's a window.
Yeah.
Because if whatever happens, whether they're successful or whether they're not successful, Scottie Barnes should take those minutes.
And that is what Nick Nurse said. He was talking about if things are going well, Scottie Barnes is playing lots of minutes.
Yeah.
And so Scottie Barnes, he could be a really funky rookie. Like he could have a positive plus minus out of nowhere and have horrible box score numbers. That's a real possibility for Scottie. He could just be a really, really funky guy out there who is doing all the right things that just don't show up.
And shoot 30% from the floor.
Right. Truly, like that could happen. And Yuta Watanabe is also a guy who does a bunch of things that don't show up on the score sheet, but he's also older and the Raptors haven't invested the number 4 overall pick in him. So yeah, that's interesting. Although I would like him to kind of slurp up all the utility minutes that exist outside of whoever the Raptors are playing at forward. Like I know, Ish is like maybe more so a guard, but Isak Bonga and Sam Decker both provide different things than the other. Sam Decker, particularly a guy who shot the 3 really well playing overseas. Isak Bonga is like a super, super funky player who who ideally would give you, really high level defense if things break right, and then you're just waiting on some offensive stuff to come through. But yeah, I think Utah is the best bet if they want the team to be winning, and because there's not a ton of potential, like there's not a ton of accessible potential on like a two-way or like on partially guaranteed contract for Isak Bonga to find a role with the Raptors and then flourish into Jonathan Isaac, Sands, all the other stuff. That's the thing. So they don't have the time or probably the inclination to work these guys into the minutes that they might deserve if somebody's actually taking a shot on the potential. So Utah seems like the best bet as that guy slotting in and getting minutes.
I agree with that. I like his game a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if the Raptors are legitimately fighting for a playoff spot and Scottie Barnes is just a minus on like his offensive shortcomings are such that his minutes are a disaster. I could see, for a stretch, Watanabe actually being in the rotation, right? If they're trying to win games, that's possible. But frankly, maybe he gets 5 minutes a game. And that sucks. He's a good player. He is an NBA level guy, lots of room to grow, unique skill set. I wish there was a role for him. I just don't see it on this team.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Utah. Have been since he was with Memphis Hustle. Cool guy. I got to support my lefties. And Utah, sweet stroke, really great defender, such a cerebral guy on that end, on all ends of the floor.
Yeah.
And seemed to be tapping into a little bit more of initiative with playing in the Olympics and being the guy in Japan. You wonder if some of that could carry over and there's like a little bit more shot making pop, because he did seem like a guy who was penned in by his own idea of his game at the NBA level. Because, when you watched him play, it always seemed like he could do a little bit more and he looks capable of it. And getting over that hump, you wonder if maybe that's something that happened. Who knows? But yeah, Utah is interesting. I hope he gets, minutes. Well, he'll get minutes when Pascal isn't there. That seems like a safe bet.
Yep.
And if he really pops off, maybe he becomes a guy. I think if everything breaks right, the Raptors are like a 6th seed and they're really humming when Pascal comes back and everything breaks right. I think that's, there's an avenue to that. That's a possibility. But if they're a bad team, a really good outcome would be if Scottie Barnes is progressing extremely well and he's playing like 28 minutes a game, and Yuta Watanabe showed enough sans Pascal that he gets traded to a contender and is like maybe the 10th or 11th man somewhere. I think that would be cool.
Yeah. He could play for a playoff team, play 8-9 minutes a game, and do well in those minutes. I think he is at that point in his career. The Raptors just aren't that team.
6 years ago, Yuta Watanabe would have gotten paid like $14 million a year for the way he defends and because he shoots 40% from 3. But now you have to shoot, you have to be an explosive floor spacer. There's so many guys who shoot from a standstill now that just the talent level for shooting is just up.
It's insane.
Up. Yeah.
Yeah. So the after the end of the Heatles era, right?
Mm-hmm.
People would have gone crazy about him as a prospect.
Yeah. Like Shane Battier.
Yeah, I was just about to say Shane Battier.
James Jones, Mike Miller, all those guys. Well, Mike Miller is a little bit different, but okay, let's do we also Shvi and Malachi.
Oh, I was gonna freak out if you didn't mention Malachi. I need my Malachi time.
Okay, Malachi. Can I do my spiel?
You go first.
Malachi is a hooper, man. He's a hooper. The thing is, he just has to discover what he's best at, which he's a young player, not as young as one might think, because the Raptors, outside of Scottie, have been drafting a lot of older players, which made sense for the team building at the time. Now makes less sense, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have it all. Malachi, a young guy who is extremely wiggly on ball, has all the right mechanics to be a plus pull-up guy in the mid-range, and maybe a plus pull-up guy from 3. that would really take his career to the next level. And by all accounts, a guy who can get into the lane, get a foot, 2 feet into the paint every once in a while, and has counters that he's comfortable with. All that is true. He just doesn't do any of it at a high NBA level currently. But you can see any number of those things progressing to a, above average NBA level. And not to mention, he's got he does a pretty good job of orchestrating and directing traffic when the ball is in his hand. I found that to be a plus relative to his peers as young guards in his first year in the NBA. He has the makings, if the shot comes around in a good way, of, I would say, a pretty high quality backup guard. But of course, the shot has to come around before any of that happens. That's my Malachi thing. But he's got some wiggle, man. I love watching him play.
So I think you might be downplaying the extent to which his passing is a plus already. He is a guy who can, like right now, he can run 30 pick and rolls a game and he'll get his guys looks against a normal NBA defense, right? If a team knew he was going to run 30 pick and rolls a game, they would just short circuit everything and say, all right, you score. And then it would be a problem because his scoring isn't at that point. But he is a passer built like Kyle. He's a very creative passer. He wants to create layups, corner threes. He passes ahead of rotations. He sees quick changes immediately. He sees windows right before they open. His passing is already above average just for an NBA point guard, not for his age.
Wow.
His passing is amazing. I am less confident in his finishing. You said he can get there. I am not sure about that. I think he'll cap out as a really low frequency finisher. Like he'll almost never get there. When he does get there, he'd be lucky to be average. So offensively, yeah, that makes his jumper all that more important, right? Because I don't care how good you are as a passer. If you can't score in any way, it doesn't matter. So if he can't finish, his jumper needs to come around all the more critically. But yeah, if it does, I mean, I could see him, we're talking about scenarios. I could see him being the guy that they pair with Fred because he is actually a better passer than Dragic. And so if you want to shift Fred off ball, do the Kyle Fred dance that they did, that little, your turn, my turn, we run actions together. So it's not just stagnant. I could totally see Malachi becoming that guy. Also, plus defender already, right? So, there's tons to recommend Malachi. Like you said, though, contingent skills. Like if he doesn't improve, then there's no real value to it. So it's a funny place he finds himself because I thought he was a higher quality prospect than the team did last year. They really treated him like his development was less important than the team's success. And now when I think his development is more critical, now there's another guy whose development just matters way more. And so I think he kind of got unlucky, just the timing on which he joined the team. But, things could pan out. His shot, like you say, looks good. So I would say coin flip 50-50 if he's a plus rotation player or a negative rotation player.
Right. You wrote the big Malachi piece, right? Yes.
I called him Steph Curry with a totally normal jump shot rather than the greatest jump shot of all time.
Okay, so let's dig into this a little bit. I agree. Last year, it didn't make much sense to me that a guy like Stanley or Patrick McCaw would get more minutes than Malachi Flynn because Malachi wasn't a big enough negative, and there's still development that, you look at a guy who could end up as a starter in the NBA. That's pretty optimistic.
A lot has to break right, but
yeah,
could.
But that could happen, and that's important. So Steph Curry with a totally normal jumper. Steph Curry is a brilliant passer. He really is. So Malachi Flynn, you're seeing reads, and I do agree with you that he he passes against pre-rotation and he can outfox it. Absolutely, he can. Do you find that when the Raptors structure advantage into a set and there's a guy who gets like a step, that he's hitting that guy? Because like you said, he's a better passer than Dragic, and this is a fun delineation, is like creator versus strictly passer. Dragic gets into the paint and has those wraparound passes and can go. You think he's looking to the one corner and he sprays back out to above the break. And
he doesn't create like Dragic creates.
There's a lot of funky creation, but as you say, if he's a better passer than Dragic, he's probably passing guys into areas a lot. That's something you've noticed?
Yeah. The other thing though is he almost only wants to hit a home run. And so he will hold on to the ball, even though he sees a pass. He'll be like, oh, I'll get a better one later. And then he just doesn't. He kind of has that Fred gene as well, where he doesn't want to do something unless it's perfect.
Don't turn it over.
Yeah. And so, there's like you say, there's some benefits. Fred has like the lowest turnover rate ever. But if he is going to unlock himself as a passer, he's got to take the first thing. He's got to be better, like faster at not reads. He's very fast at reads, but he's just got to like accept good is sometimes enough.
I might have to go watch some Flynn film, like go watch like a 4-assist game he might have. That's really
I think
interesting that you rate him higher than Dragic as a passer.
I think that's normal
awesome,
though, for a guard who like doesn't get any time, because he like his whole life he ran teams, he was the floor general, he ran a million pick and rolls, and now he never touches the ball. Like, of course you're going to hold on to it longer than you should.
But yeah, he was one of the best offensive engines in college basketball at San Diego.
Yeah.
He was.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, like you said, run 30 pick and rolls. He was probably the best pick and roll player in the country when he got drafted. Like that's firmly in his bag. So
it was him or Grant Riller, right?
Yeah, and Riller has also kind of got boned as far as his team situation as well. Really, I know Blake and Robel really liked Riller. I know both of them were like, this guy. And I know they're probably both pretty upset that he's just kind of gotten stored.
It sucks the way that works. I like, there's 450 rotations, or not 450 jobs in the NBA, like as players. And there's like 1,000 guys who could conceivably succeed in them in the world. And it just sucks. A guy like Grant Riller, I mean, he goes to a different scenario, his whole career could turn out different. And it's very rare that someone goes to the wrong scenario. They're an iffy guy anyway, whether they'll make it, and they come back. A Danny Green type guy. That's very rare.
That's why the Raptors should have drafted Sharif Cooper. Because, baby, that would have been fun. I would have.
Or anyone that Memphis has taken, like ever.
Yeah, Bane, Tillman, whoever, right? I guess they took Zaire this year at the top, but I wouldn't have taken Zaire over Scottie. But they were way down at that point.
Yeah.
Relative. Okay, so left on like the guaranteed, Svi and Delano. Svi got traded for Hami Diallo and kind of toiled away. Had a couple big games actually shooting threes on OKC. But I think Hami is like a far more intriguing player. I really like Hami Diallo. But Svi, obviously they didn't see enough that they want to take fire on him. He is tantalizing as a shooter because he can shoot while in motion. He can, you always wonder with those guys, they got a little bit of size to them. They have a super sweet stroke, and you wonder, maybe is there a season, a Wayne Ellington season where you tease like high volume and 40% out of them or something like that.
Look, those guys who have those seasons, Wayne Ellington, what teams do they always come on? They're always losing teams. You never have a guy have that season on a good team.
That was on the super funky Heat team, I think. The one that went 16-34 and then 34-16. I think.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I think Ellington.
No, wasn't
that.
Oh, it was on that team. I remember he hit that three where Blake wrote a piece diagramming the entire play from the out. It was the sidelines out of
three.
bounds. Yeah. Oh my God. How do I remember that and not my parents' birthdays? I remember every part of this play.
Yeah. Do you want to diagram it for us?
No. I should. My mom's birthday. That's what I need to focus on. That's like in a couple weeks.
It's also, anyway, speaking as somebody who is a party to and also does diagram plays like on another podcast, maybe it's dry, maybe it isn't. You really got to be able to do it in a good way. And if you don't have the visual aid, I don't think people are gonna tune in. So yeah, we'll skip your diagramming.
Dude, we're in the 14th hour. No one's tuned in anymore.
That's true. I'm gonna check the analytics once this comes out, see if anybody's stuck with us the whole time. Delano Banton. Thoughts on Delano?
Yeah. I think he could be a guy. He could be a rotation player like years down the road. He's huge. He's a good passer. Apparently his jump shot is entirely reworked already. There was, Nick was saying after practice today that he is enrolled in the Raptors. You said hours ago that I'm going to keep making that joke about Pascal, being like 18 months away from graduating the course. Apparently Banton is in the same course, the same program. And already has reworked his jumper, which is good. He's not going to play this year, but I'm glad he's on the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's all we need to do to focus on Ben. Could be already. You never know how players like Banton are going to turn out. Giannis Antetokounmpo is another guy who they said he was going to be a point guard, and he is not at all point guard, but he has also achieved like the 100th percentile of what he can be. Mm-hmm. So everybody's like, oh, he needs to be this. This is what makes him unique. And he's way better than anybody could have possibly imagined, except like the one dude who's like, yeah, he's going to finals MVP, 2 MVPs by the time he's 26, which is pretty goddamn optimistic. And, but she likes Giannis. Okay. And I get it. I do. Big shout out Giannis. But anyway,
my dog, there's people talking outside the window and she chose to bark at them. She was too lazy to get up off her back. So she's like lying upside down and like angrily yelling outside at the people. Sorry, please continue.
The best way to do it. But yeah, so Delano, what would he look like at the NBA level? Nobody, not even Delano, not even the Raptors have any clue. They just know he's a strange amalgam of different skills. And they're just like, maybe he hits on a couple and then we decide what that is. But that's what he is right now.
His like third step, I don't know what number, third or fourth step on the drive is unbelievable. You know what I mean? Where he like,
his finishing step, like something like that.
No, it's the one before that.
Okay.
His penultimate step.
The penultimate step.
You played at a high level. So you probably did the one-on-one drill where it's like you can only make one move, you only have a certain number of dribbles, and you just like no winners, or it's just like you take a move, I take a move. You know that game I'm talking about, that drill. It's a good drill. Delano would be significantly better if you're allowed 2 moves rather than 1. That's that step I'm talking about. The transition step where it's not a counter. You realize your first move has failed, but he's so juicy that he just springs into something and then he's at the rim. That's his greatest skill that I saw in preseason or in summer league, was just this like weird penultimate step that allowed him to get to the rim even after he'd been bottled up.
That's the funk, baby.
That's
the funk. That you're damn right. Okay, we talked about Decker. We talked about Bunga. Freddie Gillespie. I don't think he's going to be on the roster, unfortunately. Even though the vibes, they are immaculate. I don't think he's going to be on the roster.
So I'm publishing actually in like, what is it? In like 2 hours now, 9 a.m. about I've made that joke 14 times.
That means this podcast is out, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are currently live. I'm publishing the player review for all the guys that we just missed, which includes Freddie. And he had a stretch where he stabilized a rotation. There was a week there where he was a good player in a rotation for an NBA team. And whether or not he makes the team, I agree with you. I doubt he does. I don't think he should. You can't take that away from him because what a performance, and the fact that he was able to do that should at least keep him in the hunt for NBA spots down the line.
I just wish he had like $300K guaranteed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I just wish, for the time that he spent with the club, that kind of stuff, and for his passing resemblance to Eric Andre. I just wish that I hope he gets a lot of money.
Teams will do that, by the way. They will allow someone's contract to guarantee and then release them the next day.
Yep.
So we can hope.
Fingers crossed. But yeah, Freddie, especially with Summer League, he did not have a good Summer League. In fact, he was really, really bad. And what teams are typically looking for? This is like a very old adage, but you're looking for flashes from your first year guys in Summer League, and you're looking from dominance from your second year guys, and if not dominance, extreme levels of competence.
Yeah, consistency.
Freddie was not able to exhibit that, unfortunately, in Summer League, which sucks because he's a really great guy. But this also maybe ends up on the Raptors. Who knows? What we say is entertainment. We can be good at our jobs and we can know a lot of stuff, but the Raptors are not going to. Well, not the whole front office. I know very many members listen to this podcast, but the whole front office isn't going to listen to this and decide based on what we say. But yeah, Freddie, it seems unlikely that he'll hang on with the Raptors, but that does not mean his NBA dream is dead.
Yep.
Ish, Wainwright, Reggie Perry, thoughts? Any of them? We're kind of in the weeds now. We have been in the weeds, as it were. But
Wainwright might make the roster. I mean, if you want to talk about immaculate vibes, and that's the thing about this year. This is where we started, and I want to bring it back. Thank God that the team has a Wainwright and the team has a Barnes. Man, last year was a drag. Everyone hated that season, especially the players. And now there's guys who are just so overjoyed to be there. Their joy is a catalyst for the entire season, for fans. And Wainwright's one of those guys who is just I'm so happy that he's there, that he's at this level, and he is. And it's, I'm rooting for him just because he's that type of guy you want to see succeed. And also is as strong as Khem Birch. And, if his jumper clicks, he could really be an NBA guy. He could be a Yuta this year. That level of competency. I would hope for him to make the roster, in fact.
And also the jumper clicking, some folks think it's going to click. There's some guys who like the mechanics. So, maybe fingers crossed. I like him too. I've heard quite literally nothing, but not even good things. I've heard nothing but great things about Wainwright. So, yeah. David Johnson, Champagne. David Johnson, you could listen to the podcast I did with Henry Ward, and we gave way more time to David Johnson than probably anybody has given him. Henry Ward thought he was a lottery talent. So
he can shoot.
He can shoot. So, although he didn't shoot as well as he would have hoped in Summer League.
No, but looking at his jumper, and I'm not a shot doctor, but you can just tell when you look at his jumper that that's a man who can shoot.
Not a shot doctor, just a doctor. But yeah, so if you want the goods on David Johnson, the podcast I did with Henry Ward has 20 minutes just on David. And Champagne, I admittedly know very little about his game. However, I do promise I will keep you tuned in to what I see in his two-way contract with the 905 and what he's doing at that level, because he is another one of those funk fest guys. A lot of Raptors, you're just kind of waiting, seeing what these guys look like. And that is a fun place for a basketball team to be from an analysis perspective. Like this, the Raptors, as far as guys who do analysis-based writing, a feast for the eyes, I would think. And for people who write about narrative and stuff like that, there's a lot of interesting stories on the team as well. And people who write about winning or want to talk about winning and losing, maybe you don't have such a good time with the Raptors this year, but we'll see. Do you have any thoughts on him?
No, I'm with you. I didn't see as much funk to his game. I saw just like a pretty straight up and down guy. Like he was bigger than you'd expect. Good finisher. Just less excitement, I think, than a lot of those other guys at the end of the bench. All I know about him is what I saw in Summer League. He had some games. He had some games where he's good in Summer League. I agree with you, though. I think fun is the operative word, right? Like all these guys are just fun players, and I've been missing that from the Raptors. So I'm thankful that the team is what it is this year.
Do you want to sign off with a wins-loss prediction, or do you care to do that? You don't have to.
I'll do wins-losses.
Sure.
Yeah. Let's say 2 games over 5. No, let's say 2 games under 500.
I'll go 34-48.
Oh, wow. We do have very different perspectives on this team.
We do. So we'll see.
That's interesting. So we talked a lot about scenarios very briefly. Where do we differ? What scenarios do I see playing out that you don't see, and vice versa, to lead to that difference in opinion?
Well, Pascal is gone.
Mm-hmm.
You rate Fred higher than I do. I rate Pascal higher than you do. And
I think we rate Pascal about the same.
Oh, there you go.
I rate him extremely.
I do agree that Fred really drives winning. I think that front court without Pascal there, that's crazy, dude. That is a really, really bad NBA front court.
Yeah, they're going to lose a lot of games to start the year.
That's my thing. And then Pascal, he has to come back and he has to be like all NBA level for them to win, to get back into a position where they're at 500. That's my expectation. I also don't expect Scottie to be a overall plus. I don't expect Gary Trent Jr. to be an overall plus. So
yeah,
I'm looking like, and Khem Birch, in my most optimistic mood, would it be even? You know what I mean? Yeah. So God, do I respect Fred, and what he did last year was so impressive. Really, really impressive stuff from Fred last year, both on a personal and as a basketball player level. Like just his will and the conscientiousness and his patience for media and for everybody around him was just like, holy smokes, what a man. But I don't know if he can drag the team for that long. That's a really big ask. But yeah, the front court is in shambles to start the year. Like it's one of the 5 worst front courts in the NBA.
Yeah. God, how much a Larry Nance would help that team to start the year?
How much Larry Nance would help any team? Larry Nance is
awesome. Larry Nance is very good. Yeah. That's fair. I think I think what we probably differ on then is
Birch, for sure.
Yeah, Birch. Maybe less Fred than we always say we disagree, but then say the same things about him.
I just use like more negative connotations, but you and I end up at the same place basically.
Oh, every time. Oh. Maybe OG, I guess. I think Fred and OG, that's like you put them on any lineup and you're going to do pretty okay.
but they didn't last year. That's like my holdup, right? And so like that's maybe I believe last year was a year, and they weren't good last year. That's like my big thing. And they have a lot of new pieces that I'm waiting for them to prove that they can be good again, because the defense wasn't good, and the offense was better than the defense for a long time. But that's the big thing for me. I just have to see it, because they're missing a lot. They didn't really do anything to shore up. Like, they're still losing Kyle Lowry, by the way. And Kyle Lowry's a pretty important guy, pretty good basketball player.
Yeah, he didn't have a great year last year.
No, definitely not. But he's still a good player,
yeah,
in my estimation anyway. But that's probably it, is like, I need things to be proven to me. I am no longer operating under the assumption that, tons of governments are using the Raptors win-loss over to launder money. You know what I mean? Like the guarantee that it was.
yeah.
That type of thing.
So
I need to see it.
Some VanVleet and Anunoby had a net rating in 2-player lineups last year of 4.3, which is excellent.
No, sorry. That's not, I don't mean that like they're not good together, but like they can't play 48 minutes is what I mean.
No.
Like
but they also only played in 36 games together last year. And if they were to play in twice that this year, then it's hard to see them being too horrible a team.
Fair.
Also, the other fact check that I wanted to mention, 7'3". That's Scottie Barnes' wingspan, not 7'4", 7'3".
Right. Okay.
That's where I'm at. Okay. So that's what we disagree on. I'm just glad we found the hinge. I'll be curious to see where we end up. You usually end up being right about these things more than I do. But if I had to guess, I would bet more on your bet than on my bet, which is an insane thing to say. But
I don't know. I don't know if I'm keeping track of what we when we throw our hats into the ring of prediction.
Predicted everything that happened in Dune, every element.
That was like, I was picking up what they're putting down. There are no breadcrumbs for me, by the way. Like this, yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I have to finish that. Dune, God Emperor of Dune. And progress forward in our mini book club, the Sam and Lewis book club. Is there anything you'd like to say before we get out of here?
I think that's a beautiful place to leave it. The Sam and Lewis book club.
It's very, very, it's a term, selective with its membership process. It's
also the books we read.
Yes. Do you want to read Haruki Murakami, Kafka by the Shore with me? Heard it's pretty good.
Sounds beautiful. I'm in.
Okay. Apparently Murakami tends to write in what feels like dreamlike sequences, and it's very surreal. Sounds pretty up your alley.
Much like this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, the floor's yours, brother. You want to plug yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be 538 this year, writing about the league. For my Raptors stuff, you can still find me at Raptors Republic. Hopping on podcasts here and there, mostly written. As always, though, one of my absolute favorite basketball-related things to do is be here, talk with you, learn so much about strides and dragons. So, yeah, man, wonderful, wonderful way to start the year. I appreciate this.
I appreciate you, brother. Very few people do I appreciate more than you. I revere your mind and your kindness that you share to me in the world. So, oh, yeah, I knew I'd put you off with that one. But listener, thanks for tuning in. If you're still listening, hi, Emma. You're the listener. Thank you for listening, Emma. I appreciate you so much. I'm really looking forward to providing all the reaction pods you listen to this year. And if you're another person who's like, hey, why don't I get a shout out at the end of the podcast? You just message me on Twitter or email me and be like, hey, I want that. I listened to 2 hours and 45 minutes. Give me the respect I'm due. And you know what? I will. So thanks for tuning in. Louis, thank you so much. I've already lathered you in compliments, so we won't do that again. But yeah, listener, thanks for tuning in. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night. Have a blessed day and goodbye. Goodbye.